some of the things you're reading about in Los Angeles. Thank goodness we sent out some wonderful National Guard. They've really helped, and a lot of problems they were having out there. They were afraid to do anything, and we sent out the troops, and they've done a fantastic job. So I want to thank them very much. Children and for their employees in many cases.
Governor Newsom about this.
Well, the biggest change from that statement is we have an incompetent governor. So I talked about governors, but I didn't talk about he's an incompetent governor. Look at the job he's doing in California. He's destroying one of our great states. And if I didn't get involved, if we didn't bring the Guard in, and we would bring more in if we needed it, because we have to make sure there's going to be law and order. You had a disaster happening. And they now admit it was a disaster. I watched the chief yesterday, who's a good man, by the way, and he said, "Wow, we're lucky we did this because they were overwhelmed. You saw what was happening. It's really, it's going to be something incredible for."
And what crime has he committed that would warrant his arrest? What crime has Governor Newsom committed?
A crime has he committed?
Yeah, to warrant his arrest, as you had
I think his
suggested earlier.
primary crime is running for governor because he's done such a bad job. What he's done to that state is like what Biden did to this country. And that's pretty bad. It's a wrong philosophy. Thousands, hundreds of thousands of illegal immigrants, many of them prisoners. They're taking up your health care. They're taking up your space in schools. They're taking up your hospital. And in many cases, they're criminals. And
as we say in the House, I'll yield back.
Thank you very much, Mike.
The fact that he says, you want a civil war on the streets of America.
No, it's just the opposite. I don't want a civil war. A civil war would happen if you left it. If you left it to people like him, and I liked him. You know, I always got along with him. Never had a problem with him. But he's grossly incompetent. Okay.
Negotiators in London.
As we come together to invest in the future of our country.
I wouldn't call it quite an insurrection, but it could have led to an insurrection. I mean, that was a lot of harm that was going on last night. I watched it very closely, and it was amazing that the job that the National Guard did. And by the way, the police were working very hard also. But, you know, the police are given instructions to be politically correct. I said, no, you don't have to be politically correct. You have to do the job. A very powerful man in the world of business, CEO.
Are you going to deploy Marines in California?
We'll see what happens. I mean, I think we have it very well under control. I think it would have been a very bad situation. It was heading in the wrong direction. It's now heading in the right direction. And we hope to have the support of Gavin, because Gavin's the big beneficiary as we straighten out his problems. I mean, his state is a mess. And I'd like to get somebody involved in the rail because, look, personally, it should have never been built because you can fly there for $2. And what are you doing? They're doing that.
I, in partnership with Governor Gavin Newsom, are suing President Trump and asking the court to set aside the president's unlawful action federalizing the California National Guard. As I'm sure you've been closely following, in the early hours of Sunday morning, President Trump and Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth unlawfully federalized 2,000 California National Guard troops for 60 days with no indication as to when they intend to stand down. They did so without authorization from Governor Newsom and against the wishes of local law enforcement who are on the ground, actively assessing and responding to the situation in Los Angeles in real time, a situation that didn't warrant the National Guard. Since Trump announced his plan to deploy troops, the situation on the ground has escalated quickly, with unrest growing overnight, causing highways to close and putting people in danger. This wasn't the case on Saturday or Sunday morning. This was not inevitable. We'll never know what might have been had the president left our state and local authorities to continue the important work they were already doing and were more than capable of doing. What we do know is that what we saw yesterday happened after the president's unnecessary, counterproductive, and most importantly, unlawful order. an order that abused the federal government's authority and violated the 10th Amendment and federal law, an order that skipped over multiple rational, common sense, strategic steps that should have been deployed to quell unrest and prevent escalation. This is a law that requires the governor's consent to activate the National Guard. This is the first time since 1965 that a president has activated the National Guard without a request from the state's governor. And the governor of California knows how to call in the National Guard if and when it's needed. He did it with the LA fires. He did it in the summer of 2020 with some of the protests in California. So this is something that is within Governor Newsom's sovereignty, and he did not authorize the use of the National Guard here, did not call for it. Yesterday afternoon, Governor Newsom actually sent a letter to Mr. Hegseth requesting that the secretary rescind the unlawful deployment of troops and return them to the governor's command. The request was ignored. We don't take lightly to the president abusing his authority and unlawfully mobilizing California National Guard troops. Let's be very clear, there was no risk of rebellion, no threat of foreign invasion, no inability for the federal government to enforce federal laws. It's no accident that the right to peaceful protest is in the First Amendment. It's because peaceful protest is a cornerstone of any healthy democracy. The ability to come together in community, call out injustice, speak truth to power, and demand accountability from those in power defines who we are as Americans. To silence the people is to smother our democracy. To any who are outraged with the conduct of President Trump and his administration who feel moved to stand up and speak out, I urge you to do so peacefully, safely, and lawfully. To any opportunists who see peaceful protests as their moment to create chaos, know that local law enforcement are on the ground, ready to take action in order to protect public safety and protect the right to peaceful protest. The governor should have nothing to worry about because he has only done lawful things. And you saw what he said in response to that threat. He called their bluff. If they decide to arrest a governor, it will be a very significant ratcheting up of their unlawful actions. And of course, we'll do everything in our power to make sure no rights are violated and that the rights and freedoms of all people, including our governor, are protected. The goal of the lawsuit is to secure a declaration from the court that the Trump order federalizing the National Guard and deploying them to Los Angeles was unlawful. We will also seek injunctive relief and a restraining order at the appropriate time. And yes, we think we will win. We only bring cases we believe we will win based on the law and the facts and our analysis. We wouldn't bring this one if we weren't confident of our success. We think that the conditions required to invoke the statute here, 10 U.S.C. 12406, were absolutely not present, and thus the Trump administration's reliance on that section of the law was inappropriate. But they can enforce immigration laws if they do it lawfully. And I say the word lawfully very deliberately. Doesn't mean they can do anything and everything anytime they want. They can't violate people's Fourth Amendment rights. They can't falsely arrest people or wrongfully search people or improperly detain people. They can't racially profile. They can't use excessive force. So there's a lot of ways that in the course of an immigration enforcement action, there could be unlawful conduct. And that is not allowed, that is not permissible. It violates the law, and there's ways to remedy that if it happens.